Jeff Hawkins is an amazing yoga teacher with plenty of certificates and accolades to back that up. He's got his doctorate in physical therapy, multiple certificates from amazing yoga instructors around this area. His knowledge base is one of the things that I think drew me most to him and his classes. So today we're going to talk to Jeff about his journey, how he gathered this knowledge base, and talk about his Dharma, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. Dharma is our right way of living, and maybe another way to look at it is your actualization, right? Why do all the things that you're passionate about make sense to you, and how do they manifest into a way that you can present this interesting information to the world in the way that you see it? Love this conversation with Jeff, getting to know him better and putting the information out there about this gentleman. Really excited about this conversation. Hope you get something out of it. We'll see you on the other side. But first, a message from our sponsor. Our healing journey can be difficult and might feel lonely at times. That's why I love sound baths. Where we can get together in a community, we intrinsically support and feel supported by others. And that combined energy can help us go deeper into our own healing journeys. And all you have to do is just lay there for 1 hour and listen to beautiful healing sounds. I'm a sound healing practitioner, and I hold sound baths on a regular basis in the greater Seattle area. You can find my next sound baths on my website at adamrealhealing.com. That's Adam, A-D-A-M, Real, R-I-E-H-L, Healing, Healing.com. AdamRealHealing.com. Your healing is worth your time. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Jeff Hawkins. All right, welcome back to our show. Today I'm talking with new homie of mine. Jeff and I have known each other now, taught at the same studio for a few months. I am so excited when I meet new teachers. Especially now that COVID's happened, I haven't been able to have my practice the way I normally have. I haven't been able to take the classes from the teachers I normally do. And so, I just really thrive to have a solid yoga practice. And so when I heard you got hired at B1, I was like, okay, great. Another male teacher, which is awesome. Just, helps with the demographic, helps with the approach. But then I took your class and I'm like, holy shit, dude, you teach like nobody else I know. The connections that you have with the muscles, the connection with breath, the slowness, the way that you teach, and it's very methodical. And I fell in love with your practice the first class that I took.
Oh, thank you.
As soon as I was done, I laid there until somebody had to scrape me off that mat. And I was like, nah, dude, I'm going to stay here and enjoy this.
Soak it in.
Exactly, man. So Jeff's got his doctorate in physical therapy. He's reached his 500 hour in yoga teacher training probably multiple times. He's got multiple certifications. Has worked with amazing teachers in this area like Ali Valdez, Jason Crandall, and has started his own company called YogaHawk LLC. And Jeff, man, thank you so much for being here, brother.
Oh, appreciate the opportunity.
Man. Yeah. I get so jazzed when I meet people that speak to me, and not everybody's going to speak to everybody, right?
For sure.
And I love that because then we find really why we like that person that we really are drawn to. But I haven't been drawn to a yoga teacher in a very long time. And so first off, just thank you for being the authentic human being that you are.
Yeah, thank you.
It's so refreshing to see somebody really own who they are in their practice. A lot of times, especially in the Northwest, I have a lot of newer teachers, not that you're a new teacher, but I have a lot of newer teachers that come to me and that are like, how do I keep my class engaged? How do I teach like this person? How do I, X fill in the blank? And my answer to them always is teach from your authentic place.
Be yourself.
Be yourself. Teach from your injuries. Teach from your successes. Teach from your failures.
What you know.
Exactly. And when you do that, when you authentically teach from where you're at, if you're looking for it, that following will find you. The people that need your style of teaching, that need your authenticity will find you. And so how did you, you have a very unique style. And it's not like Jeff's teaching a style of yoga that's never been seen before, but it's very unique. And hearing your accolades and what you've accomplished, I can draw lines now to, okay, the way that you teach is very PT based. I can understand the muscle movements and things like that. But when you started your journey into understanding the body better, did you know that yoga was going to be a journey for you?
I didn't. I used to get a lot of clients when I was just doing more traditional physical therapy that I wish my yoga instructor was a PT, or I wish my PT was a yoga instructor, and kind of put the wheels in motion. But I don't think I really understood kind of what they were saying. I don't think I really understood the body, just because I never took the opportunity to kind of get into my own body and just learn how I'm moving. And we get into our down dog, and there's just so much going on in down dog that you could just hang there, but then you could spread your fingers, you could spin the biceps forward, you could just do all these things to really engage the shoulder blades, the hips, the hip flexors. So kind of for me, just like learning how my body moved and then dealing with the injuries like you mentioned kind of just helped me find different ways to incorporate get that into other people.
Yeah.
Like more motor learning type things. So you mentioned going slow. I mean, I think there are better ways in yoga to get a cardio, or better ways to get a cardio workout than yoga.
Right.
And then so kind of just having that understanding, and then taking my experience from a physical therapy clinic, knowing like, folks have weak low back, multifaceted muscles, weak hip flexors, we're sitting down, we're rounding, like, there's so many opportunities in yoga to address those, and there are just so much fewer opportunities in traditional physical therapy to reach people. I have in clinics I might be working with 3 to 4 people an hour, and that's just what you have to do to kind of stay afloat, and you get rewarded in that setting for the more people you see, not necessarily on the outcomes.
Right.
And I guess in yoga there's no really outcome. But you can see, folks that you've been practicing with a long time, like when they stick with the practice and kind of stick with kind of what I'm trying to teach, like, wow, I can see, like, for instance, in a plank, hips aren't sagging as much. They have that strength in the shoulder blades, really protract and lift the hips up, and that's what's rewarding to me.
Yeah.
And just being able to, send people off the mat, feeling better, but having some things that long term is going to help them. Functional health.
Yeah.
So
do you think so with PT, a lot of times people are sent to PT, like they've injured themselves, or they need some kind of recovery, so they're going to PT, whether it's from the doctor's recommendation, or somebody's like, hey, you need to monitor this, go to PT. But where yoga is more of like, I guess, a voluntary thing. I've chosen to go to yoga. I'm choosing to have this membership. I'm choosing to go sweat my ass off for an hour long in this hot, humid ass crazy room. Do you think a little bit of that might be that people going to PT think of that as work? Like, oh shit, I gotta fucking go to PT.
Yeah.
Or whereas people are going to yoga, they're like, I'm gonna go to goddamn yoga.
Right.
I'm gonna go sweat my ass off.
I mean, in PT, we have to give your home program, and you do this 3-4 times a week.
Right.
And they come back, you can tell when they haven't done it. I mean, just they're not better.
Right.
And mainly it's insurance paying for it, so that it's nothing really out of the pocket. I would even get folks that, I guess what was frustrating to me is, so like a lot of folks just didn't really care much about their health. Like if they had to pay a $50 copay to come in, like, I'm not going to come into yoga. I'm not going to come into physical therapy. I'm just going to search the internet and kind of figure out things on my own. Where you're going to pay for a membership at a yoga class, pay for your classes, and so I just think that drives you to want to put in the work, put in the effort. And there are days you have it, there are days you don't. People might say F you to me and like what I'm saying, but that's the next day they're like, I really love this.
Yep. So and I love you to death, Jeff, and I love all the teachers that I have, but I can honestly say that I've told every single yoga teacher in my head to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
Every single time. Yeah. And it's not, again, nothing personal, and it's not even me, it's my ego. And I've noticed that now about myself. It's like when my ego thinks that I've held the pose for too long, or something's not the way that I think it should be, my ego's like, get fucked. This is terrible. Yeah. But it's never a thing. It's never, there's no validity to it. It's the ego of like, I don't want to be here. You're making me try hard. I don't want to do this. It's me kicking and screaming. But when I get to that point, it's also the point where I know like, oh, I need to be here. Yeah. I need to be here and monitor this.
And then some things might not work for you. Yeah. And, we all know our bodies better than I do. Yeah. So kind of making those little modifications, whether you don't like squeezing the elbows in or squeezing them out, that's up to personal preference, what you get your engagement out of. Yeah. So, yeah.
When you, so you also do a lot of Instagram stuff right now.
I have been, yeah. It's kind of getting a little bit more into that. Just finding different ways, just these little tips and techniques that, I've learned over years. Some I've learned kind of just using my mat as a laboratory just to play around with my body, and things that I've picked up from my
lab as a laboratory. Oh, yeah. Do you take ideas that you see in classes of like constant corrections that we have to make. Like you're talking about downward dog, twist, pushing your elbows to the front, rotating your shoulders in, things like that. Do you like look at the class and say, oh, I'm seeing this a lot, so this is what my next, Instagram things are going to be about, how to protract shoulders, how to dial in the elbows, or is it more of you have like what you're interested in and you kind of follow that path?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I mean, there's like what I usually teach for a month is kind of what I'm working on for that month.
Yeah.
So we had worked on a lot of shoulder blade stuff, and I have a weak right shoulder. I'm in the handstand, so kind of getting it up over my head, comfortably is sometimes difficult for me. So it's kind of I add these things into my class. I'm like, well, not everybody's in my class, but more folks can find me online. So these little 45, 55 second, digestible little tips.
Yeah.
Kind of helps, but also kind of I do see, or just draw back on what I had seen in a clinic where, like I mentioned a minute ago, like low back's always weak, you can't sit upright. And so I'd add those things in. And I don't do as much traditional physical therapy anymore as I used to. So a lot of that is kind of just relying on what I had done in the past. I think I started practicing around 2007 when I graduated. But yeah, I usually teach kind of what I'm interested in. And I try not to go beyond kind of my knowledge base. If there's something I don't know, I'm always looking to learn something else. Like I'm always taking classes online with the teacher I did my 500 hours with.
Nice. Okay.
So I always get inspiration there. When I take classes, maybe kind of like you said, if there's those FU moments, like I don't like this, maybe something like, maybe not to contrast someone, but it's like, all right, here's a different perspective of a way to kind of do things.
Yeah. I love when I get different perspectives.
Yeah.
When I get different transitions or even just different dialogue for the transition that might be the same. You do that a lot when you talk about, just the slowness and this engaging your left glute to pull your hip down to open up warrior two, something like that. There's that, it's not just drop the heel, right? You have these different cues that, again, you can tell from the background that you have that really dial into muscle activation or, rotation or things like that to where it's not, and again, not dogging on any yoga teachers or any dialogue, but sometimes, the dialogue can just be very flat and sometimes it can be very, very useful in very intricate ways, but still not very wordy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I love about your practice is that you get the point across very succinctly without having to throw in a bunch of flowery words, which isn't a bad thing. It's just your style, and I love that.
More power in the things you don't say than the things you say.
Right.
So give space.
Yes. So I have I'm a yoga teacher also, and I have a very kind of monotone-ish type voice. My voice is low. It gets lost in the heating sound. It gets lost in the music. And so one of the cues or one of the suggestions I got when I first started teaching was talk like English was my second language. So not, okay, lift your right leg, point the toe, push your hip down, now step through, crescent lunge. My feedback was, lift right leg, step through, crescent lunge. Like take out the extra words, just get to the point.
Get to the point, yeah.
And once you get to the point and you get used to that way that your voice is projecting, then you can figure out if you want to flower things up or not. But just get the point out and go from there. And I love that kind of directness to the way you teach. You do have a way of kind of nonchalantly holding space for class, and I love that so much. It's such a hard thing to do, to teach the intensity that you teach from that just like nonchalantness of like, man, we're gonna just step forward and crescent lunge.
Yeah.
And I'm just like
piece of cake.
And I'm just sweating and dying and huffing and puffing. I'm like, okay, I got this. If he's calm, I should be calm.
Yeah.
I got this, right?
A false sense of security, right?
Exactly.
Start out slow and then, whoa.
All of a sudden you're sweating and you're huffing and puffing.
It's funny, I teach another studio, it's a fitness studio as well. And we'll get folks that come in that lift a ton of weights, moving fast. And they'll take this yoga class and they have trouble slowing it down.
Right.
But then they say, like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, I can squat 500 pounds, bench 300 pounds, but to hold this plank or to step my leg through, like, and keep my hips high, like, I can't do that.
Yep.
And then, I mean, you can eventually. But.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it is, in my opinion, we're in this very fast-paced life. We're constantly going, we're constantly moving. How many things can we accomplish at one time? Like we have our phones on, we have our computers open, we have the TV on. Like what all can we do to accomplish this like crazy attention span that we're going for? So when we can slow things down, especially like in that yoga practice, I really think that it creates discomfort for people. People aren't used to sitting in silence, meditation, things like that, right? And so when we have to sit in stillness with our own thoughts, and especially when we're being challenged and that ego starts flaring, there's a lot going on besides you just in that warrior two pose for 5 breaths.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of mentality, a lot of psychology going on there. And so, I think we need our ways of sitting in sensation silence, in some kind of way. Positive sensation, negative sensation, achy sensation, but learning how to sit in that moment of discomfort, but know that it's not your life. It's not going to be this way forever. My knees are not going to hurt like this in this way because I'm not going to sit like this for the next 10 years. I can move, but right now it's hard.
Yeah.
And so I think we challenge ourselves a little bit more with that. We start to find how much we actually do have, how strong we actually are, how magical we actually are, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. The little bit of kind of that effort, a little bit of know-how, and just opens up so many different possibilities.
Hell yeah, man.
And that's why I try to make my classes a little bit challenging, add things in that, we might not typically do in a class because people can do it. It's just, you just have to do it. I think you were mentioning in a class the other day doing bound half moon.
Yeah.
And I can't do it.
I
can fall over in it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those things that just, I think with time and practice, that's something that's doable.
Yeah.
It's not completely out of the realm of possibility for most bodies.
It's poses like that even if we're not able to do it now, seeing the body's abilities that are able to do it can give us some kind of roadmap and say, oh my God, that's not just a thing that this crazy yoga teacher said. Look, there's 4 people doing that.
Right?
Holy shit.
Yeah.
All right. For me, my personal practice, when I started taking yoga, I was very, very much a victim of my story. I can't do this because of X. I can't do this because of Y. And a lot of the success that I had early on in my practice was practicing next to this guy named Austin. And he was so I'm 6 foot even, at the time I was 240. I was a little bit heavier than I am now. And Austin was about 6'4", broad shouldered, probably 250. He's a big dude. And, but watching him get into a bind from side angle, full bind, which is something that I thought I would break my arms trying to even accomplish, even with an assist. And I saw him just wrap it up, push an arm, grab a hand. I'm like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
I have, my body has the ability to do this. I didn't have any injuries. I don't have any, scoliosis. I don't have anything keeping me from it, rather than my own just physical inability at that time. But seeing somebody do that gave me the hope that, holy shit, I can do this. There's hope for me. So I think just giving people the option of, like Ashtavakrishna. Not a lot of people can do 8-angle pose, but you've taught it a couple times. And I can see the people doing Vajrasana, which is one of my favorite yoga poses,
right.
just sitting back and saying, holy shit, look at how cool the human body can be. I bet I can do that one of these days, and just giving hope.
Yeah. That's what it's about.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get to the idea of teaching a similar style class for a month?
I guess just more of motor learning.
Okay.
I would see folks in a clinic, and I wouldn't just give them an exercise one time and say, do something different the next day and something different the next day. Kind of the way we just learn those motor patterns, teaching the body just to skillfully move in those transitions. I find that, just over time, that you just need more opportunities just to practice those things as opposed to one time. So, and I can see that certain things over the course of a month, like in folks in class, like you said, the Ashtavakrishna, maybe week 1 they're not into it, but week 3 they're trying it, and week 4 they're maybe balancing for a second, and then so yeah, and plus I like planning things out, so it almost makes it easier to kind of think about a long-term plan, what I want to teach. So if I have 12 months planned out of, I don't have 12 months planned out, but if I have 6 months, say, planned out of what I want to teach, and I think the past we've been working on, what did we work on? We kind of did some twisting, some binding. I think we're going to go into some back bending. So I think kind of it all just kind of builds up. We did some hip flexor stuff and some leg stuff. So kind of works its way up the chain, and one thing builds on the other. And I try not to forget about what I did, say, in January, but kind of keep it fresh in July. So
yeah, I've thought about doing that style, right? So where I have a class that I pretty much stay true to, alternate, here and there. And but I always felt like for me, I would get bored teaching it, or for the students, they would get bored taking it.
Yeah.
But I've even I've even taken classes where there were teachers that did have that month long kind of flow, but they weren't switching it up. It was it literally was exact flow, exact playlist, everything right. It made pretty much dialogue.
Yeah.
You're one of the first teachers that I've taken that style class from, and it's not like you have the same style, but just that month long. That I fucking love every time, and it keeps me entertained, which is a good thing for yoga. After that's a weird, I guess, statement, but I'm 10 years deep into my yoga practice now, taking classes, and so I've got a good understanding of what I can do, what I'm working on, things I need to stay away from, and so like part of yoga for me is like exciting, like oh shit, look at that transition, and that's entertainment to me. It's like it's not like I'm watching TV, but like. You've just challenged my body or my ego or my psyche in a way that hasn't been challenged or hasn't been in a while. So it's like, oh, challenge accepted. Yeah. Let's try this shit out,
And usually the technique's the same, but just a little bit different, thinking about it a little bit differently. And that's how I got I studied with Jason Crandall. And I think I was in San Francisco one time, and I was like, all right, I know he's teaching 6 o'clock at Love Story. I need to make my way over there. So I took like an hour cab ride to get there. And I remember putting my mat down next to this gal, and she was like, have you ever taken Jason's class? I'm like, no, I'm just online a little bit. Yeah. She's like, you're going to love it. And she's like, I did his teacher training. So after the class, she looked over, she's like, what do you think about it? I was like, it's the best class I've ever taken.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, I was signed up for his 500, 300-hour program and spending 6 weeks in San Francisco doing it. And, probably best decision of my life.
Yeah. I've not met Jason Crandall. I've heard many amazing things from about that man. And a lot of the instructors that I'm friends with have taken some kind of training from him. Yeah. And that's definitely a guy that I want to nail down one of these days.
And like you said, he just resonates with me. He comes from more of an anatomical background. He doesn't have the physical therapy background, but he's put years and years of study into that. Yeah. And so he just kind of teaches from a way that just resonated with me. Whereas other teachers, nothing wrong with them, but I don't necessarily get too much into the spiritual aspect of yoga, which is there, maybe my own personal practice or just meditation, but not too much in class. And he didn't really do that either. And I was like, it's more musculoskeletal guy, and like I can use my background, build on that, and yeah.
I appreciate your approach for the non-spiritual side, and I'm a spiritual person, right? And so, but and not to say that I don't like when people add that in there, but I do like when people don't, because then again, that's your authenticity. Like if you got up there after taking your class for a long time now, and you've like all of a sudden started talking about like source or spirit or energies, and it might not seem authentic, right? Unless that's a path that you've chosen to go on. Yeah. Right? One of my favorite teachers of all time, Zach Halley, he is one of the most experimental, influential, asana teachers I've ever met. Gets me into poses that I never thought I could even look at, let alone do. And there is not an iota of spirituality to his yoga practice. He literally comes in, okay, child's pose, breathe, right? There's no like, okay, let's energies and all this stuff, it's like, hey, we're getting to fucking work, right? Get your child's pose, let's do this. And I appreciate that because that's authentic to you, and we got to be that person, when we can teach from an authentic place, then we're not trying to play a character. And when we're playing a character, we might forget we're that character sometimes and fall out of character. But when you can just be that consistent you that you are, which you've been consistent since the day I met you. Fucking love that, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have a number of certificates that you've gotten from yoga, from PT, things like that. Do you have something that you think would be like your pivotal, like, gosh, I'm fucking so good, I'm so happy I learned this. This was the training that really set me off or connected a lot of dots for me?
I think when I went to San Francisco.
Okay. With Jason?
With Jason. I think I started probably my mid-30s doing Bikram yoga. Okay. And, I drank the Kool-Aid of that. If it wasn't Bikram, it wasn't yoga. Wasn't going to do anything but that. And then I think, and then when I got into, I guess it was Instagram, like I started seeing these folks doing handstands and, fun things. I was like, it's not, the ultimate goal, but I'd like to be able to do that. And I'm not learning that from my 26 postures. I'm not getting any of that. Right. And then so that's when I started like looking more into teacher trainings. I think Jason came to Ritual House or something, and I took like a shoulder workshop from him, which just kind of blew my mind. It's kind of stuff that I learned in PT school, but he was bringing some stuff I learned in PT school, and he was bringing back into the curriculum.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my aha moment when I finally got into like a 2-hour class with him, did the practice, and then just kind of taking what I learned with him, what I learned with Ali, what I learned in my Hatha training, and in everything else, what I've read, kind of experience, and just kind of putting it into what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
as you've learned, because you're learning, I mean, from my perspective, looking at your knowledge base, you're learning from a bunch of different types of lineages, right? And lineage could be from a teacher, but it can also be from a modality of thinking. Do you find that some of the lineages, modalities counter each other a little bit? Or does they kind of like complement in their own kind of ways?
I think they're a complement in their own kind of ways. I mean, I guess there are certain, well, I take that back. Like, for instance, I don't know, I learned when I put your arms overhead, draw your shoulder blades down, which is completely not how the body works. Like when you want to put your arms overhead, you want to raise your shoulder blades up because they rotate up, the inner part rotates down, just to provide that free movement and just the rhythm of our scapula, how it moves. So there are definitely things that I learned maybe from a teacher training or just in class that are contradictory to the way I see things and the way kind of the body biomechanically works.
Okay.
So they have that, but then I usually bring it to more of that aspect. Is this real how the body works, or is this just something that somebody told me that I should say in a class? And you've probably been in classes too where you've taken a teacher, said something, and then 5 years later you take the same teacher saying the same thing, like the dialogue never changed, and like, well, that's not kind of right.
We've grown from now.
Yeah.
We were kind of joking about that before we hit record, and one of the cues that I hear all the time that we now know that just it doesn't sit right is lock your knee out or lock any joint out. Lock out your elbows, lock out your knees, anything. And that's a classic Bikram dialogue. Lock it out, lock it out, lock it out, lock it out. And like repeatedly, like machine gun saying that, lock it out, and then change.
Yeah.
And we know now that, well, one, the idea of locking it out was lifting the kneecap to engage the quad, but what we all hear is slam your knee, hyperextend. So even though we know that that's not a healthy dialogue to say, it's still being taught by the Bikram camp, and it's still being practiced on a regular basis.
And not even necessarily Bikram. I hear it in Vinyasa classes too. So I mean, and maybe folks got their Bikram start.
Right.
And that's where I get a little bit of my inspiration too. If I hear something that it's not just personal opinion, but science kind of where we're at. If it doesn't seem to mesh with how the body works, I get a little bit of a teaching point there, and maybe add some of my content to my Instagram page based on that.
Yeah. Well, if we look at yoga is thousands of years old. When we had an idea of how the body worked, right? And now we have a different idea of how the body works. Not to say one's right and one's wrong. It's just maybe one's a little more in depth because now we have microscopes and we can cut people open and we know like physically how the body works. So in a way, there's a big camp of people that are die-hard yogis, and they don't want to see yoga change. And I get it to an extent. I mean, if you look at yoga, there's goat yoga, there's naked yoga, there's all these types of these offshoots of yoga now, which might not be the traditional yoga that we maybe thousands of years, none of us practice, right? We weren't thousands of years old, but and I get that, but there's also the understandings that we now have that mesh with those older practices. And, we can take cars for an example, right? When the Model T was developed back in the 30s or the 20s, it was a crank start, right? It can go a mile an hour. There was not like consistency. It was very like, it was iffy if it worked or not. Now we have new technology. Now we can integrate that into the way cars are. There's gas, there's now power, they're electric, there's all these different types of cars now that if we would have just stuck with that version of a car, it would take me 4 hours to get from here to the yoga studio, which is 10 minutes down the road. Right? So yes, we want to take the new technology and understandings and integrate it with old stuff. But it's a delicate process. Are we just bastardizing all of that now with this new perception of understanding? Or is there a way that we can, methodically intertwine it, and bring awareness to why we do this now, because we have the skeletal understanding.
I just think probably just thousands of years ago, the needs of the body are different. I mean, we're sitting at computers. I mean, maybe back then, we weren't sitting at a computer and rounding around a lot, where now in yoga, we need to do a little more extension, a little more, chest opening, a little more back strengthening, where, society back then, maybe weren't sitting all the time. Maybe they, were sitting and meditating, but, working kind of folks, and kind of, so just the needs of modern society kind of think dictates just the need to change and kind of still keep true. I mean, like in my classes, I try not to make things not yoga. So I try to keep everything yoga, but a modern version of it. I mean, Warrior 1's Warrior 1, Warrior 2's Warrior 2, like all the poses. I'm not gonna, you're not gonna see me doing jumping jacks or anything like that in a class, because I don't think it's yoga. But you might hear me say, kind of engage this way, or take the hand beyond the shoulder when you're doing a plank. Just because I think that's just a little better, sometimes safer way to do things. And like I said, it works well on my body too. So
have you found in your trainings, with that example of what was once thought was right has now changed? Is there anything that stands out for you that I learned it this way, and then once I started integrating it or learned something different, I kind of had to back away from that and change the way
I mean, kind of the whole, when the arms overhead, plug the shoulder blades down. I mean, I used to say that when I took my first hatha. Same thing in Bikram, they would kind of bring your knee for wind removing pose, feel that pinching sensation in your hip. But in reality, like, the body doesn't like that compression. Like, you're irritating that tendon in your hip, and I did it. I taught it, feel the pinching. And then now you've probably heard me in class, if you feel any discomfort, take the knee a little wider than the shoulder. We don't want that bad sensation. We want sensation, but we don't want bad sensation. So things like that. Another thing I work on a lot is, we did the feet a couple months ago. And kind of, I learned don't put the toes in the ground, keep them lifted. But if I press the ball of my big toe, the outside, grip with the toes a little bit, you just get so much more engagement across the foot, across the ankle joint. And this is one thing, I say this in my classes all the time, is, probably 4 or 5 years ago, my balance wasn't as good as it is now. But I've been practicing that way for probably 3 or 4 years now. And I mean, I can stand in front of a class and, like, take my leg out to the left and Chitta Padangusthasana B and still look over and have a conversation, or not conversation, but talk about what I'm doing. Where before, I wasn't, just because I had that feedback across my ankles. So just kind of those motor pathways, the body just knows how to, like, orient itself in space when you kind of just give it a little more sensation, a little more feedback. Same thing, fingers gripping into the mat a little bit. Like you just get that feedback, and kind of goes a long way than just kind of hanging out, I think.
And sometimes too, it's nice to, and we don't have to fill the space always with dialogue, but a lot of times, when teachers leave too much space, it's like, did you forget about us? Are we done? Or did I not hear something? So when you can just layer in those little cues, and again, not like machine gun fire, not like every space needs to be filled, but press the ball on the right toe. Feel the arch sink down. It's like, oh, I do feel that.
And over again. We're just not saying it one time, but that's the way we learn. Just like repetition. Oh yeah, man. So,
and as that new information comes in, it's up to us to find out how it lands with us, and not be so dismissive of nope, I learned this way, so that can't be the way because I've already learned this way. Your way's wrong. One of my favorite examples of this is it's an old story. This guy Ignaz Semmelweis. So he was a doctor back in the 1800s, and he was monitoring childbirths. And so he was monitoring childbirths for about a year, and he was noticing that when the nurses delivered babies, they had about 70% success rate for the mother and for the child. But when doctors delivered the babies, they had about 40 to 50% success rate, so much, much lower. So this guy, Semmelweis, was like, okay, so let's look at this. And the thing that he noticed the most was that nurses were washing their hands. Doctors were not. Doctors went from autopsies, from dealing with dead people, straight to delivering babies. And the mortality rates for the moms dropped significantly, or raised significantly. So the moms were dying. Babies were okay, but the moms were just not surviving. So this guy Semmelweis was like, okay, hey guys, I found something. Let's just try this. Nurses wash their hands. They got good success rate for babies. Doctors don't wash their hands. Babies are dying, moms are dying. So let's try washing our hands. That dude was just mercilessly mocked. He was thrown in an insane asylum because of his views on washing hands. He was actually beaten to death and died from sepsis poisoning in the hospital, or in the facility he was in. And then 50 years later, another guy was like, "Hey guys,
This guy was right.
how about we wash our hands? Maybe we save some lives." Fucking hell, man! Everybody took it from there.
Yeah.
Now, posthumously, I think they've awarded Semmelweis some kind of award, maybe a Nobel Prize of some sort, for the work that he did and bringing the awareness to, even though the dude was beaten to death.
Yeah.
But it's those kind of ideas. Like, he was completely right, but because of the way that everybody was indoctrinated at that point in time. No, there was no room for that. We have this shit figured out.
Yeah.
So I think, that's just something as simple as washing our hands, which, we just went through all that with COVID. Right?
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, whatever it is, but the majority of us started washing our hands more and stopped spitting on birthday cakes as much, right? And that's stuff that we figure out, and once we do, we integrate it. But are we able to put our ego aside to let this new information in and see how it works with us, instead of saying, nope, I've already figured out life. This is me. Not going to know your information's no good.
I think you just have to want to learn.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to, just maybe question yourself, question what you're saying, and I don't like to say things that I can't prove, I can't back up.
Right.
So that's the way I do my research. I want to provide everybody in my class just a good experience on yoga, a good way to help you on the mat, but also kind of take everything off the mat, just help you out in life.
Yeah.
Not, like we talked about, not spiritually, mental, or anything like that, although I think the movement and kind of getting into your body kind of, goes into the mind too, and so it all plays a role. But
I think when we don't force spirituality, it allows somebody to find it on their own. And when I first started yoga, I was not a spiritual human. Like, I was very, very atheist, I guess. But, I think when I think back at it, I think I was too scared to think about it deeply. But the teachers, some teachers, again, like, were spiritual, some weren't, but I think it just left the space for me to explore it. And even people like Tang, who's a friend of ours, a teacher at B1, he's a devout Buddhist monk, but unless you ask him about it, he's not going to sit there and tell you to meditate and do all these things. But if you broach the subject and you open it up,
he's got a lot to say.
He's got a lot to say about it. And I think a lot of times, when we're ready, there's the famous quote, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. And so having those moments of seeing why something lands with you, whether there's a spiritual connotation behind it or nothing, scientific, but there's some reason that whatever was spoken to you, so maybe chase that down, see where that lands with you.
Was it in the autobiography of a yogi, when it was first brought to the States, folks kind of condemned it just because it seemed just too religious.
Okay.
But he was like, I don't know if you've read the book.
I have, yeah.
He's like, I'm not trying to make you a better Buddhist, a better Christian. Yoga is to make you a better whatever you are.
Right.
And there's no kind of religious aspect to it. It's just more spiritual, and however you want to take that path, whether it's spiritual, whether it's physical, or it's a combination of both, just to make you a better whatever it is you're at.
Right. Yeah. And yoga for me, that was the sneaky thing for me, was you always hear the yoga off the mat, yoga off the mat. And until I actually physically experienced that, in my work life, in my family life, feeling the breath come into me when I got anxious, or feeling, the desire to meditate when I, couldn't get my thoughts straight, whatever it was, I started to feel that yoga start to come into my practice as a human, instead of just I just need to go sweat and try to get in better shape.
Yeah.
And that was, I think that's a sneaky thing for me. It's like, it wasn't just blatant. It wasn't like, go fucking worship God and go do the things because you're a sinner and you gotta repent and all this shit. It was just like, hey, you're going to sweat a little bit. After you're done, you might be a little vulnerable. Why don't you just think about that? Think about what your vulnerability means to you, right? You have those moments, and then you have this weird conversation with a beautiful human you've never met before, and you'll probably never meet again. But you're cracked open because of what you just did. They're cracked open because of what they just did. And all of a sudden, you're talking about shit you never thought you'd talk about before.
Yeah, here we are.
Right? Exactly. I mean, that's how Jeff and I met.
I think probably one of the more profound things I got into was my first teacher training. Was we were learning about Ayurveda and stuff like that, but he's like, you don't have to be a vegetarian. You don't have to do this. Just
Right.
like, just do the yoga. The yoga is kind of what you want to make it. Like, you don't have to follow anyone else's kind of doctrine of what, they say yoga should be. You should be a vegetarian. You should meditate 10 hours a day.
Right.
Like, just gotta do the yoga. Be yourself. And I thought that was, although he was really strict about the 26 and 2 postures. And if he ever heard someone say sleeping eagle, he would come over and he'd come over and smack you.
I've taken a couple of classes with teachers that are that like hardcore Bikram lineage.
Yeah.
And they probably would hate my classes.
Yeah,
they would probably hate my classes. But you know what? It's again, that's we come from where we come from.
And I teach a hatha class, probably close to the 26 and 2 style, some variation. So I'm not super rigid about it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you talked about your Dharma.
Uh-huh.
And I love that because that's not a very familiar term people throw around. Dharma in general it is, but my Dharma,
Mm-hmm.
and what that means. And so how did that come up to you? How did you find the idea of what Dharma is? And then how did you kind of trace down what your Dharma is?
I mean, I guess I never really understood the idea of it until one of my 200-hour trainings where I read A Great Work of Your Life.
Yeah.
And they kind of explained it. But I just kind of, for a long time, just felt that I was in that service industry. I was, younger, I was athletic, and I, lifted weights and played sports. And then I knew that wasn't going to, last forever.
Right.
But I wanted to kind of be in that field where I can, help people get from point A to point B, kind of to be into a better space. Mm-hmm. So I thought about doing athletic training my first year in college. I didn't like it. It was more of being an athlete, working 3 seasons. We had access to all the tutors and everything like that, but that wasn't me, giving ankle wraps and ice massages.
Right.
And then so I kind of stopped that. And then I ended up working after I did a general health science degree, psychology degree. I started working as a medical assistant for a while, just into an emergency clinic. I learned phlebotomy. I thought about med school. I thought about dental school, surgical assistant, PA school, all that I kind of did. I even did a little bit of web design.
All right.
I did a little real estate.
Uh-huh.
So I did all these things. And then I think I moved down to Texas, in 2000 probably.
Okay.
Right about the time of the .com boom.
Oh, yeah.
My brother-in-law was down there, and he's like, if you have a college degree, you come down, and they're hiring you to do this. Well, as soon as I get down there, we had the .com bust.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was working for a couple months in a tech as a web designer, and then all the folks that in these high-tech companies, managers, just got laid off, so they were taking my job. And then so I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go back to medicine. So I worked as a medical assistant again, and then I moved to, I guess, Pennsylvania, and I took a job as a guy on the phone, insurance. You call me up, say, hey, can this guy, how many visits can he have? I'll ask a few questions. I'll punch in the computer. I'm like, oh, okay, he can have 5 visits. Which I hated doing that, sitting behind the phone. And so I ended up leaving that job. I actually kind of got let go for failing a drug test. So I smoked a little pot, but it kind of got my butt in gears. Like, all right, I'm gonna go put all my resume out to all the PT clinics in the area. Found one that I liked. I got hired, and probably 6 months later, I was in PT school just because I just liked that. I felt that was where I could, give my most. I like the body. I like teaching. I like strength, flexibility. And then just kind of what they did. You got to know the people there for, maybe a month, 6 weeks. And so that just encouraged me to kind of find my Dharma. And then like I mentioned about, I would see folks in my clinic that were yoga, and which kind of they had PTs that were yoga instructors. So I kind of implanted it. And then when I moved out here, probably about 10 years ago, I was practicing at the Elements, Bikram Elements in downtown Bellevue.
Oh, yeah.
And I met this teacher, Sean, and, we became friends. And he's like, Jeff, I think you should look into teacher training. I think you would be a good teacher. And so he implanted that in my head. I had some stuff in my head before. And then months and months later, one day I just went to the studio and signed on the door, said, hey, thanks for your business. See you later.
Damn.
So I'm like, all right. So I had to find another place. I went over to another local studio that just happened to be hosting a 200-hour hatha training coming up. I was like, well, I have the time, I have the money. Sean kind of put this in my head, like I should do this. I was like, let me just do it.
Yeah.
And I had the time, and I just loved it from the day that I started doing it. And I was like, I can make this, my life as opposed to what I was doing, just working for numbers and so that just kind of put the wheels in motion for me. All those little pieces, those little stepping stones that kind of got me here. And sometimes you fail, sometimes you don't, but
I think I love the quote, your failure is your first attempt at success.
Mm-hmm. Or I think Bob Dylan said there's no success like failure, and failure is no success at all.
Yep.
So I put that in one of my I think my entrance essay to PT school.
Oh, right on.
Maybe they were Bob Dylan fans.
Exactly, right? Yeah. There's so much we can learn from perceived failures.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a junior manager back in my corporate days, I was the first time I was in charge of hiring somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was asking my GM at the time, so what do you look for? Qualifications, X amount of time in this place, whatever. Nobody's been fired. And so he said the most profound thing at that time, I think I was 22, and he's like, I would rather hire somebody that's failed 1,000 times than somebody that's never failed once. Because you got to know what it feels like to fail. You got to know what it feels like to try again, to embrace the understanding of, shit, that didn't work. How can I do this again? How can I revamp this, or maybe throw that idea out and come at it from a different way? But when you find that way to approach, then we have resilience, and we have grit, and we have determination. If we just accepted the failure and said, that didn't work, I'm just going to go sit back in my corner and pout.
Yeah.
What do you learn from that besides the fact that you're not physically ready to continue to push on?
Yeah.
And that's not something that can really be trained. That's something that like we experience in life. So I love that like determination, that failure. Let me fail. Let me fail at something I desperately wanted, because I'm going to learn a lot from that. And I'm going to come back at it.
Yeah. That's I guess that's kind of what I did.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
What so with your Dharma now, do you feel that it's growing and changing, or are you kind of like moving in towards like kind of understanding of what it is?
I think I'm more into understanding what it is.
Okay.
I think probably several years ago, I would have figured like I want to be one of those like super well-known yoga instructors. That mainly because I think I can have good knowledge to pass along.
Yeah, most definitely.
But now I don't feel like I need to have that. I feel happy coming out of a class and somebody's like, "Oh my God, that was so good. I didn't know I could do that in my shoulder. It's the first time I've gotten into this pose." And so that has kind of almost like, I think in the book, think of the big or the small as big. So like these little small moments, you don't necessarily have to have that big grand moment, but these little small things just add up and kind of just lay your Dharma down in front of you. So
yeah, it is, man. Yeah. And with the Dharma, what I like to look at it as because Dharma is a Hindu term, talking about like your right way of living, and it's not somebody else's right way. It's what you've described.
Yeah.
And so actualization moments are one of the things that I accumulate that to now. And I try to take the word self-actualization, the word self out of it. There's this guy, Simon Sinek. He's a motivational speaker, talks about management, stuff like that. Love his mindset. And he's got this diatribe that he goes on about how self-actualization is a big hoax, because nobody gets to their point of actualization by themselves. There's always somebody that helps in some kind of way. And even, the myth of the self-made man, self-made person, somebody gave that person encouragement. Somebody gave that person a chance. Hey, here's $1. You're doing great. Keep on it. And so like the self-actualization is very selfish, because so many people helped you get to the point of where you found the way that all of your weird, quirky knowledge and the things that you're passionate about, the colors, the shapes, the smells, the information, the fucking weird quantum physics mixed with yoga, mixed with PT, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And that happens to come together into this actualization moment. to make you understand this is my path. You know, this is the reason why I love Ninja Turtles and fucking, you know, all this other stuff, right? There's a weird way this all mixes together, unique to the physiology of you as a human being. You know, and I so just embrace that idea so much, because there's so many times where I've like picked up a book based off of a cover and be like, I don't know why, but I'm going to read this book. And even after I read it, I'm like, I don't know why I just read that book. And then 2 years from then, I'm like, oh my God, this relates back to that fucking random book that I read 2 years ago. And now this puzzle piece now fits. And now I have this new understanding that I'm going to share with my students, with my clients, with my practitioners, whatever it is, because I was open enough to embrace it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's such a, you know, when we can get to those points of, and a lot of that is that ego, you know, we talked about earlier, is we let our ego go. We understand that the ego plays a part, but it's not the deciding factor anymore. And when that ego, for me, when my ego gets flared, that typically for me is something like, haha, that's your work, buddy. You got some work to do.
For sure.
But if I just dismiss my ego, or I'm not listening to it because we've all now demonized our egos, we want to kill the ego. No, man, everything has a place in our body. You know, our ego has as much place as our consciousness does. It's just
find that balance.
Right. You know, and if you think about this, you know, like with your ego, you know, a lot of us aren't aware that the ego is driving our bus, right, for as long as it has been. So once we find out that the ego is the thing that's driving the bus, and that we literally have a 7-year-old managing our emotions, you know, in a psychological way, that it's hard to release that control. Your ego wants to dig in. So even though you've recognized that your ego is controlling what your thoughts and your ambitions are, that doesn't mean it's just going to go take a seat. You know, but also it doesn't mean you can live without it. Everything has a part in you. Right? So finding the proper way of the balance and how everything fits in there.
Yeah. I named my dog Ego.
Did you? What kind of dog?
He's a Yorkie poo. That was 7 pounds.
I have a psychiatrist friend that his advice to me was name your ego. So it's funny you named your dog Ego. Because he was like, when you name your ego, then you can physically have conversations with it. And so my ego's name is Corporate Adam, because that's how it flares up. It wants balance. It wants budgets. It wants definitions of why we're doing the shit. It wants a plan. It doesn't feel comfortable without. Like, so there's all these things that Corporate Adam thinks that it needs. And so, you know, but now I'm like, oh, Corporate Adam. Oh, here's a P&L, buddy. Go balance that shit and then come back to me later, you know?
And I wonder if it's kind of part of my ego why I plan out a month-long worth of classes, because I gotta have that plan, you know? I can't just go in and just like half-ass it. I gotta know and kind of give that experience. And so that's probably part of my ego. Like, I have to do this for that.
You know, and I'm a planner too. And every single class that I teach, vinyasa class, like I know what I'm doing. You know, I'm able to maneuver if I need to. People come in with injuries, like I know that now. But I'm very methodical and planned out, and that's why, like, when I took your classes, it's part of that. Just like for me, it was like, oh my God, I have permission to teach the same class for 4 weeks in a row, because there's so much that goes into memorizing a new class and the transitions and what you want to accomplish and all this stuff, that part of me was like, oh, like that would create so much time in my month to to really focus on one class, you know, dial it in, understand it, be able to maneuver within it, but still have the structure of a class for 4 weeks. Because I'll be goddamn, man, my first vinyasa class a week is Thursday and I have Sunday. By Tuesday, I'm like cramming. I got my notes in front of me. I'm making playlists. I'm doing all this stuff. And I'm like, memorize this flow, memorize that flow. How do I want to talk about this transition? How do I get to that transition? Is it safe? Did I open up the body properly? Am I, oh my God, I got to throw this out because I forgot to throw in a half splits. Now the hamstring's not even opened up and I'm throwing in a full standing splits. And God damn it, it's all gone to shit.
And everybody knows.
Everybody knows. They're all looking at me now. So man, I really do appreciate that, because it's not like we need permission, but sometimes we need somebody to set the example to show us that, like, we're just really in our heads about shit.
Yeah, I mean, one of my teachers, like Jason, he would kind of do a curriculum style 2 thing. But then but when I took training with Allie, she was like, I never teach the same class twice. And she's amazing at it. So smart. I don't know how she comes up with everything she comes up with. based on astrology and astronomy, the day of the week, and so she kind of, that's why her classes are never the same, because it's a different day every day, and the moon's in a different spot. But I just couldn't do that. Like I don't think I had the brain power to think that quick on the fly.
Yeah.
I need a kind of that corporate Adam. I need that plan.
Yep. And you know what? Sometimes we need to lean into that stuff. Like I've created that much structure in my life for a reason. If I leave it up to my whimsicalness, and I tried that when I first started teaching vinyasa classes. I was trying to teach, like I would go in, feel the room, like Tangs goes in there, he's like, what do you guys want to work on today? Hips, shoulders, ankles, cool. All right. And then he just like constructs this beautiful flow, this beautiful class. For me, that was more anxiety ridden than like trying to just cram for a class, you know?
Sure.
So there was a couple times where I got in there, and they were first classes I ever taught, so it's going to be weird anyways, in my own opinion. But it never landed like I wanted to. I'd always leave class being like, fuck, I didn't throw this in. I forgot that. Oh my God, I didn't even do that thing I was gonna, like, that was the thing I was excited about. And so then I finally had to, like, okay, lean into it. And the analogy that I found that really helped me, I love hip hop. It's one of my favorite genres of music, and there's so many different approaches to it, right? And so the two MCs that I when I was teaching teacher trainings, I think this is what kind of got through to them too, was that, okay, so let's take Jay-Z and Eminem, okay, both extremely successful MCs, multi-Grammy, platinum winning, blah, 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 all this shit, right? Jay-Z is off the top of his head, doesn't write a single thing down. He remembers every single song he's ever written. He can just flow like nobody's business. Eminem writes his shit down, right? He's got just pads and pads and pads of papers full of his flows, full of his rhymes, understanding of what he got to do.
Yeah.
Both are still really, really good at what they do, and they're very successful in the ways that we judge success. They're very unique to their own styles, right? But they listen to themselves, are authentic to themselves, like we talked about earlier. Like if Eminem just tried to freestyle all the time, which he probably can, he's probably amazing at it, but he's found his variation of writing shit down. I remember a story actually where Eminem had lost, he was at an airport and somebody stole his rhyme pad from his backpack. And it basically put one of his LP, I think it was the Marshall Mathers LP. It pushed it back almost a year, because like all of his work was gone. Right. Whereas Jay-Z is like, I remember that shit. I'll just go back in the studio and re-record it.
I write down. I have an app on my phone that it gives me a little bit of a structure, how I want, like, my structure of class. Yeah. And it's my little vignettes that I like to teach. So I have a couple years back, since I started teaching vinyasa, just a lot of things just written down. I look back and I'm like, oh, that was a cool little transition. This fits in here. Let me add that. Because there's not, one thing I found when I got into PT school is, we were all new. Like, I was a little bit one of the older ones in my class. I went back probably 5 years after undergrad from just doing all that work experience I mentioned. And I'd worked in a PT clinic, and one of our challenges or projects was to come up with an exercise program. And I was like, all right, well, I've seen this kind of works. Let's do this. And then, like, everybody just seemed to want to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. And then when well, they told us this yesterday, this works, we need to do this. And same thing in yoga. It's like, no need to completely reinvent the wheel. There's like definite things in there that work, things I did a year ago that work. It doesn't have to be, 100% different, so that something you've never seen. And that's a little bit of something I had to get over too. Like certain little, like I think this past month when we did our classes on the shoulders, I think I started the first one kind of hands, forearms on the back. I think I started every kind of flow with that, and like, but I was like, that's kind of sets the
holding the block. Oh God, that was so much of my shoulders, but it was great. It was so good.
Were you there when we were doing it overhead? I might not have been teaching at B1 at that point.
I don't think so. Yeah. The one I remember, we were doing Shalabhasana, but holding the block between the palms and right above your lower back. Yeah. And lift it up. Like, all I wanted to do was hook my thumbs in the bottom of the block.
Yeah, same. I think this month we're going to do it overhead. Which so now you're warned if you
exactly. Now if I don't show up on a Monday, you're gonna know why. So you've got a child, right? Play soccer. Two kids. Yeah. And it we talked about a little bit about how kids yoga might be something that you're moving towards. Yeah. I think yoga is good for everybody. But the younger we can start these kids. And not just the movement based, because most kids are movement based, like there's video games and shit like that to keep kids more sedentary, but still kids for the most part, they like to move. But what I'm really excited about with younger generations learning about yoga is not just the movement, it's the breath, it's the meditation, it's the different understandings that it can offer us. And so what's your kind of motion with this kids yoga?
I use it as preventative.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, this is years ago, probably a 25-year-old kid come in. He was a collegiate soccer player, and he was just getting into yoga after he'd finished. And he's like, I wish I had this, back. I would have probably maybe not had an ACL, not had this.
Oh, yeah.
And so, especially folks that play a single sport, high level, it's just such repetitive motion over and over and over again, where yoga, offers us like opportunities to work in different planes, different orientations in space, work on some of that end range strength that you might not get like if you're kicking a soccer ball, when your leg follows through, it's kind of like a stretch, like a hamstring stretch.
Right.
But if you get into, say, a half splits and you push that heel down, that's kind of your end range strength, and you're engaging that hamstring in its end range to help prevent maybe a high hamstring injury.
Right.
Everything kind of comes from the core. If you can hold a good solid, forearm plank or a plank with not, sagging your hips, like all that stability just projects out to your extremities.
Right.
So I use it as a preventative type thing. Occasionally I had another studio I would teach at. She would just allow me to use the studio on Fridays. So I'd have maybe 10 kids. We'd come over and just play around for like 30 minutes. That was kind of about the tolerance. And they're all friends, so they're goofing around. Especially my kid. He was probably like, he's so quiet. When he gets around his friends, he just would goof around. I'm like, come on, man. You got to be a good example here.
Right.
But then, and then you kind of at the end, like, all right, let's do some handstands. Like everybody can have a chance. I'll spot you. Just learn something cool. But so for me, if I could, just a way of prevention.
Yeah.
Like, nothing is preventative. Like physical therapy, you could come see me as a physical. Now it's a little bit easier since I do more of a cash-based type thing and seeing folks for whatever it is, whether it's yoga, knee pain. I probably wouldn't see you if you're directly out of a knee surgery. There's better places to go for that. But just the kind of like just preventative medicine, just because it's not like it's outside of dentistry. I think it's kind of not necessarily something that happens. We always just wait around till something happens and then have to put too much effort, too much cost into trying to fix or stabilize whatever it is.
Right.
When in the beginning it could have just prevented it. So getting in with these kids at a younger age, you mentioned kind of working with a cross country team.
Yeah.
I was supposed to maybe still work with like a track team in Issaquah about the coach or a liaison from the coach said they wants to get some yoga for the kids, and whether it's kind of flexibility type stuff, post workout, or it's engagement stuff to kind of get you ready, get the body warmed up for. There's just so many opportunities that yoga can offer to, just to make us healthier, make us, not so repetitive on what we're doing, give our bodies, just different ways to move, and safe ways to move too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the kids that I work with, they're mainly in high school now, but there's been, a couple of high school baseball teams I've worked with, track teams. And it's so interesting just to see how, so I'll say the first time I taught kids, I was very like self-conscious. It's like, oh shit, like kids, like I've got kids, but like I don't know how this is gonna land. Yoga is very weird to a lot of kids. My kids were at the time were like, Dad, we don't want to do this.
Oh yeah, mine still. Unless they get into a group with their friends, they don't want to do it.
And so like when I first stepped in, it was a baseball team, the first kids that I worked with, and it was I was very nervous about it, but it was well received, and and it's so interesting to see what the kids like tie themselves to, like the things that they pick up on. A lot of times it's not the movement based. The movement based is great because that's what they expect. So they're like, okay, I'm going to get here, I'm going to stretch. Yoga for kids a lot of times is stretching. But learning the idea of what a proper teacher is, right? So the job of a teacher is to, deliver the information, but also to see how the information is landing, and then to see if more information can be given, right? And so, with that too, that gives the opportunity to deliver some dialogue in a very mindful way. And that doesn't have to be spiritual. It doesn't have to be religious, but it can be, okay, so right before you're about to take your swing, right? You're in the batter's box, pitcher's winding up, you're getting nervous. How's your breath? Have you taken a full breath? When's the last time you did? Okay, so let's take an inhale through the nose, exhale. Okay, now I see the shoulders soften. Now you're more focused. You're not jittery. So giving an opportunity to like put some real world experience into some of these somatic practices, and just like planting these seeds, like I can sit there and tell you information after information, fact, and they'll probably just not land. But if I resonated into a story, an allegoric story, something relative to what you're going through, it might actually land. And so that was a cool opportunity for me to teach breath work to kids, to teach mindfulness to kids, and not in a way of, hey guys, you just signed up for a mindfulness class, now get ready to be bored about shit you don't really care about.
Right.
It's and like, no, we're gonna move, we're gonna talk, and then we're gonna throw some little spiritual stuff in there.
And the earlier you can set that foundation, just the more potential to grow.
Yes. And preventative maintenance, I think that's one of the biggest things that I encourage people to do yoga for. And it might sound stupid. If what am I going to do? I don't, how do we know if you're going to break your leg or something like that? Well, how many times have you stepped off a curb accidentally and like kind of sprained your ankle or twisted it? If you're in a yoga practice on a regular basis, your ankle is moving 360 degrees regularly. So your tendons aren't super tight in one side, loose on another. Your muscles have more give. So when you awkwardly step off that curb, your body's more forgiving because your body's used to moving in that way. And I have one of our nephews right now. He's like 20 or something. And he's got a bad sprain on his ankle. He's a lawnmower and he stepped in a hole and sprained his ankle. And so my daughter was like, Dad, how can I help? How can he help him? I'm like, well, tell him to do some yoga.
Folks come to me as, what can I do for my arm, my shoulder, my back? I'm like, go to yoga.
Yep.
And I was like, within yoga, there's specific things that, we can work on and do to kind of address that. But just in general, just get into yoga.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And just, movement-based practices. There's so much, sedentariness in our lifestyle. We're sitting all the time. We're standing in lines all the time. We're compressing our backs. Our joints are achy. I read a study a while back, and I haven't followed up on it, so forgive me if I misquote it, but it was saying that they've, for every 8 hours that you sit down consistently, it shaves a specific amount of time off of your life. And there's no getting that back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's the practice now, and this again, that's a couple of years ago, but it was work for an hour, walk for 5 minutes. Work for an hour, walk for 5 minutes. Like just so you break it up, so you're not just so sedentary all the time.
Yeah.
So that when you get up after working for 8 hours, you can barely move because your body is just so used to being in this sitting lifestyle.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, Thomas Jefferson. Quoted to say that the demise of the human civilization started with the invention of the chair.
Probably. During when we were all at home for quarantine, folks were sitting a lot. I actually put up a few practices on my YouTube channel about either a practice for gamers or just a practice for folks that sit at desks, and some of it was just simple, like getting your hands spread out so we're not. There's actually something in PT called gamer's thumb, where you just get tendonitis in your thumb muscles just because we're using the thumb. I used to get them. I would travel on my metro and be on my phone, and I would get to work and my thumbs were just like, why are my thumbs sore? Why is my neck sore? And I'm like, I'm always looking down and thumbing away. And so I kind of like, all right, let me put some things up that can address this. And you probably noticed in my class too that I don't do tons and tons of chaturanga. We add a lot of back bends, back strengthening, really, and not deep ones, but just stuff to engage. And how to engage.
Right. And that's teaching people that, giving them that little bit of feedback that it doesn't always have to be a chaturanga too. It's not, like I love the fact that you give options and that it's not even an option. This is okay. Now we're going to go to Shalabhasana. Now we're going to take a cobra. Okay. Now we're going to do a chaturanga. And it takes people out of the expectation of the practice. Every flow ends with a chaturanga or it's not a flow.
Or skip it. Go back to down dog. Exactly. Go back to child's pose.
Right.
Do what feels right.
Yep. And that giving them permission, giving us permission, and giving us options for that, I think it allows the brain to just think differently. And it takes us out of that pattern making machine that our brain is. X plus Y plus Z chaturanga. X plus Y plus Z chaturanga. It's like X plus Y plus Z. Shalabhasana. All
And
right.
it might take the ego out of it too. You're like,
Exactly.
I don't need to do 30 push-ups in between a chaturanga.
I can honestly say, and this was a dialogue in my head when I first took your class, was, why doesn't he fucking do more chaturangas? How am I going to get my handstand practice in if he doesn't let me shoot back to a chaturanga?
Right.
But I found it in more explorative ways through the way that you teach, because you do a lot of sun Cs, sun C variations. And so for me, that sun C now, okay, step forward, warrior one, then you have your forward fold. Can I do that all without using my hands? Right? Can I step forward into warrior one, and then from warrior one, I'm not using my hands at all?
Yeah.
I step forward, no hands. I forward fold, no hands. Circle sweep, come back down, step back to crescent moon, no hands. Right? Now that's a different layer of my practice that I'm not used to.
Yeah, for sure.
And so instead of my ego being like, but I want to do handstands, it's like, okay, cool. What else can I do to challenge my practice?
I'm impressed by your handstands, though. Seeing some of you guys up on that front row, I'm like, man. Sometimes I just want to sit back and watch. Yep. It's like, I got to keep going.
There's a gentleman. I don't know if if you ever met him, but David Wilson. Do you know David? Okay. He is one of the people, I should say, that will take me out of my teaching practice. When there's certain people that when you see their practice, and it doesn't always have to be handstands, there's just an elegance to somebody's way that they present their yoga practice. And but David Wilson is one of those guys that when I see him do shit, I forget what I'm doing. And so I'll be like in the middle of teaching some intricate flow, and all of a sudden Dave just pops up into a handstand from something that should not be handstandable. Like there should not be a handstand transition built into Warrior 3. Yeah. Right? And all of a sudden you're like, where the... And but it's so impressive to see and to understand that your practice that well that you can do and throw these in seamlessly, make it still work within your practice and not disrupt anything. Yeah. And not that you should have the wherewithal to make sure you're not disrupting people, but good job. Yeah. Good fucking job, man.
I think I took a rocket yoga workshop years ago, and in one of the gals, I never met her before, but the teacher asked for some feedback after we were doing some things, and she was like, I was just so impressed just the way you used your block. You just had it there, moved to the side, came out of the way, grabbed it again. And like you said, the way that David would do things is elegant, the way to get into it. And she made it sound like that, just using the block. Something simple is just a very fluid way. Yeah. And I used to be against props, straps, blocks. It's get that from your Bikram it's if you do anything but this, it's cheating.
Then you're wrong, exactly.
And then I guess when I started some of my vinyasa training, I was like, all right, let me use this block for half moon. Because I couldn't stand up at a half moon. I never did it. Right. And then, 6 months later, I don't need the block. Then I can go into the Chapasana version of it. And I have that stability. My body just knows where it's supposed to be in space. Yeah. So, yeah. And then there's kind of an art form to using blocks and props.
There really is.
And we don't often, focus on those. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think, a lot of times blocks are taught as a modification. And when we hear the word modification, it damages our ego. We're like, oh, no, I can do that. Fuck that. I don't need to bring the floor to me. I'm going to go to the floor. I don't care if it's going to trash my hips. My hand's going to the floor, side angle. Get ready. Here we go.
How did those, the blocks in Shalabhasana feel on your ego?
God, I'm surprised you didn't hear my ego.
Right. I heard everyone
was screaming.
The exhaust was too loud.
Right, exactly. But we got to be taken out of that shit.
Yeah,
we got to be showing those moments of those opportunities. Those are opportunities for us to grow and to learn, and to really open the dialogue. And I think that brings me to the last thing I really want to talk to you about is and I think I know the answer because we have conversations all the time, but I meet a lot of yoga teachers that are my way or the highway yoga teachers. This is the lineage I learned. This is the dictation. This is the dialogue. Nothing from that. I don't see you as that person. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier with dismissing kind of dialogue and props that don't, or postures that don't land anymore. But are you? Do you have students that'll come with you after class and be like, "Hey, Jeff, what was this transition, or what was the purpose of this thing?" And do you welcome that feedback or that questioning?
Yeah, I welcome any kind of feedback that's constructive. Yeah. If someone's like, "Oh, this class sucks," too many chaturangas, like, well, whatever, just take a different class. Exactly. I can't help you there. But But yeah, I definitely welcome. One of the probably the best things feedback that I've gotten is this is years ago, but just a guy came up to me after class. He's like, I love your classes. I love what you say, but sometimes I just have trouble hearing you.
Oh yeah.
And he recommended, he's like, I took some voice lessons. Maybe that's something that would work well for you. So when I did a training with Allie, she had a voice coach come in, and we were doing some oming and kind of working on that. But then I ended up taking some just private lessons with her, just work on projection. And I just think that, I think that helped me out significantly. Just being able to, for more people to hear me in a room. Because like you, I talk low, have this deeper monotone voice. And then I think recently just teaching in mask, it has encouraged me to just project more too. So when we took the masks off, I'm like, whoa, now everybody can hear me even over that exhaust. But yeah, a lot of times though, I get folks that come like afterwards, I'm kind of wondering what we're doing. Why are we doing this? And why are we doing that? But in after class, I see why we did this. It all kind of comes together, and I'm just always curious where you're going to lead this class, because it seems everything is kind of just based on a foundation, and you just kind of build and build and build. And but yeah, I like feedback, constructive criticism. That's the way to learn. And if I didn't, that would be more, I guess, of my ego, just it's my way or the highway.
Right.
And that's why I consider myself and it's just words, but I would consider myself more of a yoga teacher than a yoga instructor. So I just feel that instruction is just give a list of things to do, rather than teaching someone how to do something. So if you look on my Instagram page or anything, it will say yoga teacher.
Yeah.
As opposed to yoga instructor.
I like that.
So yeah. I guess if you look the definitions up, they're very similar.
Yeah, but I think perception though, I think that's I think you're onto something with that, because for me, instructor could be like CrossFit, where you just go in and just write whatever okay, this is the workout on the board, you guys do that 10 times, I'm out.
Yeah.
That I've just instructed you what to do. But if I'm teaching you, I'm going to be with you while you're doing those things. And not to say CrossFit's not, but that's just in my head, that's the way that kind of plays out.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I just want to be someone that just can make a positive influence on someone, on their lives, whether it's mental, spiritual, physical, anything. Just I want to just be that positive experience that they can have, and just taking you from point A to point B, to hopefully point B is a better place than A. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think again. So from my personal experience with you as a human being and as a teacher, you create this overtone of safety through the dialogue that you have, and through that, it's like a quiet confidence. You're not out there and just hey, listen to me, I'm fucking Jeff Hawkins, but the way that you talk about the things and the way that you hold the space creates trust, and that creates safety.
Yeah.
And so when those two things happen for me, that's when the magic happens, because when I trust that I know what you're doing and I feel safe doing it, fuck, man, do whatever you want, man.
Yeah.
We're going to some fun places, and it's going to be an interesting ride.
Yeah.
So, dude, I cannot wait to see how you continue on. The more tools that you add to your tool bag, but from where you're at right now, I'm so happy to know you as a human, and to have you as a teacher in my life.
Yeah, same here though.
It's just it's like I said, man. When we started this off, I love being challenged. I love meeting people that teach differently than me, that approach life differently than me. Because I know that I'm not the one that knows all the things. I don't have all the answers. So when we can find people that like that spark, man, it's hey, that person was put in your path for a reason. Yeah. And let's explore that a little bit.
And like we said earlier, it's hard you just got to find a teacher that resonates with you.
Yes.
And just kind of got to find that. And
hell yeah.
And I like it when other teachers are in my class, because maybe they just kind of feel oh, this guy kind of knows what he's talking about. Yeah. It's not just some woohoo yoga stuff that that's been passed down for generations, but it's I can bring in some of the anatomy, and sometimes I think I maybe over talk about that.
No, I don't
too
think
much
so.
biomechanics. You don't
Not
think so?
at all.
Okay. Because it was good when we had masks on and I couldn't see anybody's face of whether they disliked it or liked it. I was like, we just go. But now that we've taken masks off, if you're holding that forearm plank a little too long, I can see like...
We're seeing that.
Not too happy.
Yeah, drive into that non-happiness. We need that discomfort, man.
Yeah.
And then feel it as a teacher. Like live into that discomfort. That was one of my I used to have a whole seminar on not being offended by the way your students' faces appear in yoga teacher training, because like we're in our own shit. Like if I'm in my hatha practice, I'm not smiling.
Oh, me neither. Even if they say to smile, I'm not going to smile.
Furrowed brow, I'm engaged. I'm like working through my own shit. Like if the yoga teacher looks at me, they probably think I hate them. But at the end, I'm gonna give them a hug, give them a high five, say, "Great class, man. That was awesome."
Yeah. That's kind of the way I am. I'm very, I think, expressionless when I'm a practitioner, student in class.
Yep.
So, so it's kind of fun that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for what you do, brother. I appreciate you.
Man. Appreciate it too. I love being here. Love having you in class and keep this trend going.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
All right, brother. We'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for spending time with Jeff and I. If you have any questions or need to reach out to us, please check out the show notes for any links. Also, subscribe or like the podcast. Share it with your friends, anybody that you might feel would benefit from it. Thank you so much. Obeisance and love. We'll see y'all next time.